You can get there from here, where the roads are winding, the stories are crazy, and maps don't mean a thing. So grab your boots and saddle up, we are chasing tales untamed. From haunted mines to mountain pines, no two roads are the same. The compass spins, the banjo grins, we ride where legends claim. On the Can't Get There From Here podcast, where truth wears a crooked wing.
These are the stories erased from textbooks, hidden in dusty ledgers, and whispered across centuries. Each episode is a cinematic dive into the dark past, blending historical truth with psychological horror. If you crave the eerie, the untold, and the forgotten, you're exactly where you belong. Unlock the ledger. Discover what was never meant to be found. End of quote. And from this description, I can only conclude that the writing and research will only be of the highest quality. Did you happen to look over the Forgotten Ledgers offerings, Pops?
I did. I have a thing about Appalachian and Victorian era stories, and just looking at the selection, it would be right up my alley, except for the fact that it is obviously AI generated, and all of the incest is a little off putting. There are definitely some gems in there that I would be interested in taking a look at, though.
Absolutely. Yeah, and last week I invited listeners to take a gander at the video selections in order to see if the listeners could spot an overall theme of the particular channel. How would you describe the videos, Pops?
I'm pretty sure that they probably took prompts of whispered stories and used AI to create whole scripts about various and sundry stories about a dark and macabre Victorian era to tantalize and titillate the masses for views. I'm pretty sure that they probably took prompts of whispered stories and used the AI to create whole scripts about various and sundry stories about a dark and macabre Victorian era to tantalize and titillate the masses for views, and it looked like it might be working. With 51,000 plus subs in the 3 months that they've started doing this type of video, it gives a weird hillbilly horror energy that has really kind of become popular in niche horror podcasts like Old Gods of Appalachia.
I agree. It kind of reminded me of old time pornographic novels from like the 40s and 50s about forbidden peccadillos or domineering women. Yes, I found one of those greasy novels in my stepdad's closet. Very enlightening, I must say. And did you happen to notice the video upload dates and times?
Yeah, I did. Somebody's really pumping them out for sure. 123 videos in 3 months as of my last look on Sunday when I sat down to take a look at the video that you shared with me.
Yeah, it seems the channel owner is very prolific in producing hour-long historical narratives. They've uploaded no less than 3 videos in the 24 hours as of writing this script. I find that an extraordinary output, considering the time that must have been taken in order to gather and collate the data and editing into a cohesive story. Did you notice that, Pops?
I think that again that there's probably more time spent editing the AI pictures and making sure the generated scripts are a cohesive story, but it is extremely impressive. But I watched part of this with my daughter, and she was talking about how it was created purely for monetary purposes and it has no soul. She then made me then she then made me watch a video that was made by a Minecraft content creator on YouTube, and it had more suspense and tension in a video that was quote unquote for kids. And I will say that it was very well made and that it's head and shoulders above what is being produced for this channel.
I don't doubt that. Okay, the story opens describing a cave discovered in 1899, on the walls of which was not lined with rock but with chains. But I'm guessing that it also had at least a little bit of rock. The room also contained rotting cribs, and the air lingered the faint smell, quote, the faint smell of something that did not belong to the living, unquote. The narrator reveals that 25 men had gone missing, only their belongings recovered from under the home of 3 reclusive women. Of the women, we learn that they never seemed to age, never left the cabin, and, quote, never answered the door past midnight, unquote. Does the narrator think that it's a common practice to answer the door past midnight? I mean, I might answer it if the police showed up at my house, but I'd need them to present ID, and I'd also call the police dispatcher just to make sure the cops were actually supposed to be there. But for anyone else, I'd just call 911 and have the cops figure out who in God's name is knocking on my door after midnight. Would you agree, Pops?
Yeah, especially during that time period. Especially three women who allegedly were living alone deep in the holler. I would have to say that if someone showed up at my house in the middle of the night banging on the door, I'd probably unleash both barrels, figuratively and literally.
Yep, and I think that would be wise. We are told that the locals called the women the Ozark sisters. We also find out that the sheriff was so disturbed by what was found under the cabin that he refused to speak about it publicly, and that the official report had disappeared from Washington County archives. Such mishandling official documents is a crucial theme in this genre of video I've found.
Yeah, that's a little suspicious, but I'm thinking that there was probably never a report at all. Also, as I began to watch the video, I immediately jumped on Google and tried looking for information about this story just to see if there was at least some credence to the narrative, and I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, same here. It's what it was incredible to look up some of these names and find similar kind of names, but no, nothing. Anyway, soon after the morbid discovery under the house, the property was burned down and all of the witnesses changed their names and moved west. This leads me to believe that the witnesses were probably directly culpable in the happenings at the Ozark sisters' house.
Yeah, I mean, it's awfully convenient that everybody just moved west and changed their names. Because if
Yep.
this had actually happened, it would probably have been a lynching if there had been all of the goings on that they were talking about. So again, there wasn't a report. And would you want any surviving kin to know that you were one of the folks who killed them three women living up there in Devil's Holler?
Good point. Very good point. The narrator describes to us the house where the Ozark sisters lived, noting the sagging porch and the hand-sewn curtains that never fluttered. Okay, I'm not sure if curtains were different back then, and but I have curtains throughout my house, and I assure you they rarely flutter. Once in a while they'll shift when one of my cats pushes its way around the edge of it, but that's it. We also learned that the house had a name, the Still House. If I heard this name without context, I'd assume it was a moonshine operation. We are also told that the names of the McCullough sisters, Abigail, Ruth, Eloise, whose bloodlines, the narrator informs us, could be traced back to the first settlers in the Ozarks. So, dear listener, this obviously means that women were evil. These women were evil in particular. Never be a first adopter. Wait until the second or third generation to come out before you buy in. Otherwise, whenever you purchase, whatever you have purchased will come preloaded with demons. Just ask any tech support person.
Absolutely. Any place where there's mountains and the sun doesn't touch, you're going to find the devil and his workers, right? I'm assuming a lot here because the narration is terrible. They
Isn't
could have
it?
gotten, oh God, they could have gotten some schmuck like me off of Fiverr or something to read this and make it at least a little more tolerable to watch because the narration is halting and pauses aren't where they're supposed to be. And it's really hard for me to watch. But like you were saying, Stillhouse definitely gives moonshine energy. And as for the curtains not fluttering, why would they if the house is closed up all the time? I imagine that,
Exactly.
right? I imagine that the house is opened up to air it out periodically because if you're keeping dead or near dead men in your basement, You need to do something about the smell.
Yeah, yeah, I would think so. Well, or don't, and just stare a deadpan at anyone run who's rude enough to ask about the smell and reply, "What smell?" while staring at them coldly. But you do you. The narrator informs us that the women were not married, but somehow the property was well kept. The animals were always fed, and their supplies were always replenished. I'm sensing a teensy bit of sexism here. What about you, Pops? Three unmarried women would never be able to care for themselves or their property without the assistance of a penis having man. It must be witchcraft.
Uh, for sure. Capable single women must be witches or in cahoots with the devil because God forbid that they could do the work themselves, even though women have been doing men's work without being recognized it for years. There was a quote from Frank and Ernest, which was a comic, and this one was from 1982, and it said, "Sure, Fred Astaire was great, but Ginger Rogers did everything that he did, except she did it backwards and in high heels." Women
Right?
have always been okay. Women have always been able to do everything that men can, and usually at a greater degree of difficulty.
Yes, of course. However, they're women, so they don't actually count as humans, as we all know and agree. And as if that mystery weren't enough, the townsfolk were very disturbed by the cabin. Not the pervasive and perpetual silence that cloaked the place, it was the singing that really spooked them. And I can relate to this.
I mean, yeah, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas, which is already disturbing enough on its own, and then you hear some random singing coming down the holler, and it's not quite right because the McCullough sisters, who probably still speak either Old Irish or Scots Gaelic around the house, were probably singing in the family's native tongue. So it probably did sound alien to their ears, and it might have been somewhat off putting in addition to the fact that they were singing in the middle of the night.
Right, right. Well, at this point, we are introduced to a new character by the name of Jonathan Pike, who was the first recorded disappearance. He was a trapper from Missouri who was hunting near Devil's Hollow. What else would it be called? And even though the locals told him not to cross the creek there, his horse was later found grazing beside the creek. Its saddle torn and Pike's boots still in the stirrups. More, his tracks led up from there towards the cabin where the sisters lived. Now, I don't know a lot about saddles. I was 6 years old the last time I owned a horse, but saddles, as far as I can tell, are notoriously difficult to tear. Am I correct on that, Pops?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a black bear attack or a mountain lion. But here's the thing, right? It just going to, okay, so the guy disappeared.
Hmm.
He was told not to cross the creek. He went onto private land where there are three women living alone. I can't speak for anybody else, but if I'd have caught him out on my place at night,
Right?
and it says that his tracks led up towards the home place, so I can't imagine his intentions were entirely pure. I'll tell you what, they sure as hell wouldn't find you sitting on my front porch drinking coffee with me the next morning.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, now we're introduced to another character. Sheriff Harlan Tate led a search and questioned the Ozark sisters. They said they had not seen the man and had been busy attending to the Lord's work. The narrator tells us that the sheriff found no blood or evidence, nor any sign of of a struggle. Uh, what about the torn saddle? Did the sheriff believe Pike had torn the saddle for the hell of it? I I think the only thing that could realistically tear cured and tan leather might be, as you say, a mountain lion or a bear. At minimum, the sheriff should consider an animal attack, but the sheriff closed the case. Then 24 more men vanished within the next 6 years. So, as with every story of this kind that I've listened to so far, the sheriff or other government officials are entirely incompetent and worthless.
Yeah, the ineptitude of this sheriff in particular is amazing. His lack, you know what, Roscoe P. Coltrane. from the Dukes of Hazzard had more persistence in chasing the Duke boys than this sheriff has, you know. And
Uh-huh.
his lack of persistence in pursuing his investigation is completely mind-boggling. Also, something else that came to mind was, how are Pike's boots still in the stirrups? So
Yeah.
did they follow barefoot tracks up to the house? And then after they killed him, did they pull off his boots and stick him back in the stirrups just to befuddle and confuse people?
I don't know. It seems like a kind of a superfluous extra action that really did not add much to it. But oh well. Never mind that for now, though. The Ozark sisters had become more rumor than people, according to the narrator. They kept no company. Sorry, quote, they kept no company. They attended no church, unquote. But when their livestock was stolen, the men who were responsible were found wandering with blackened and swollen tongues, unquote. I'm not sure how these three things follow each other, but the narrator lists them as if following a logical trail.
So the sisters became an urban legend because nobody was seeing them, and they didn't come down to church. Well, when the locals have already begun to assume the worst about you, why would you want to go into town? And as
Right?
for the men who stole their livestock, who's to say that those idiots didn't know their woodcraft and ended up poisoning themselves?
Mm-hmm.
It has to be witchcraft, right? Let's blame it
Oh,
on the sisters. Those weird women must have done it.
absolutely. It's here that we find the first story contradiction. We learned earlier at the end of the story and the beginning of the video that the sisters never left their cabin. We were also told that no one ever saw any wagons delivering goods to the still house. However, after a delivery driver claimed to have heard men crying under the house, the sisters calmly showed up in town carrying fresh produce. Get used to the contradictions of this sort, dear listener, if you choose to begin listening to videos from the artificial intelligence generated genre. Contradictions abound.
Right. Now, earlier in the video, there was a specific mention that there wasn't any deliveries out to the house during the winter, especially because the ways up were snowed in and weren't passable. But all of a sudden, Samuel Hines can get up there to make a kerosene and flour delivery. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't imagine that an old house up in the hills would have need of a kerosene heater, especially if it's not being maintained through witchcraft and devilry. And
Absolutely.
and how in winter are they going to be in town 3 days later in the middle of winter with fresh produce?
Yeah, good question. Very good question. Oh, the sheriff investigated the still house and immediately dropped the case. Wow. That was just before he left office in 1897. He found the cellar door and was prevented from investigating further by a rusted lock and no one answering the door of the cabin. See? Useless.
Right. So come on now. I am someone who is a firm believer in suspension of disbelief for storytelling. But edit your story so that it makes sense to people. I mean, the AI will literally do it for you if you just put it in.
Yeah, yeah, it really will. The narrator explains the sheriff's choices by saying that laws were different back in the Ozarks back then. And quote, entire counties still lived by folk laws older than the United States itself, unquote. When people went missing, meh, it was the Lord's will or the forest had claimed them. You'd think the sheriff, with such a flexible code to adhere to, would stay in that cushy job for as long as possible. But as in many of these stories, sheriffs who run up against any unnerving event inevitably run away and abandon their community to whatever horror was bedeviling them.
Right. Now, the sheriff retired in 1897. but the case wasn't broken open until 1899.
Yep.
And I could have swore, and maybe I'm mistaken, my memory's not fresh, that it was the same sheriff in 1899 that still broke open the case. And also, how inept is someone that all of the reports were just pissed away and someone was able to just collect the evidence and take it home?
Right. Yeah, I guess laws concerning the looting of property where a suspected crime has occurred had not been invented yet. They just figure, oh hell, we're here already, might as well take a few things with us. Anyway, we are introduced to Reverend Tobias Cole, the Baptist revivalist who arrived in Washington County, and he decided to target the Ozark sisters directly in his sermons because that always works out well. The sisters took this reasonably, of course, and 1 week after Reverend Cole's last sermon, his tent was found shredded and his congregation scattered. All that remained was the Bible, which was left open on Genesis 6, verse 4, which described the sons of God took the daughters of men. Okay, I need to visualize this for our listeners. The typical Bible has fairly small print, and the chapters are generally short. For instance, Genesis 6 has only 14 verses. Uh, so it's possible that the page was open to Genesis 5, which has only one verse, which describes the written account of Adam's family line. Or it could have been Genesis 7, which has only 17 verses. How someone finds an open Bible and concludes that it was some kind of message and that the message was referring to a specific verse rather than all of the verses printed on the 2 pages is very difficult for me to understand. There's no mention that the verse was underlined or encircled in blood or anything like that. The spookier part should have been the missing reverend, I would think.
Exactly. I mean, the reverend went missing. His revival tent was tore up. Now, the fact that, okay, so the congregation would have been the townsfolk that came out for the revival that he was holding there in
Yeah,
his tent.
or he brought
And
them with him. That's the only thing that I could think of,
right,
you
right. But
know?
I mean, and then, but as far as the Bible verses go, they're only mentioning it because it fits their narrative that they're
Yep,
trying to build.
yep, it was in the script.
And the bad part is it jumps all over the place. The whole story, it just jumps all over the place and contradicts itself constantly.
Yep, yeah, it certainly does. Well, after that, the town fell silent, and the church refused to speak the names of the Ozark sisters. Quote, it began with a storm, January 14th, 1899, unquote. I don't know how this thought was compiled, but it was a single thought. Moving on, the narrative describes a fierce storm that tells about a group of miners showing up at the still house. They noticed the smoke rising from the chimney, but no light coming from the windows. So what did they do? They decided to do an illegal entry of the house, apparently. They entered the house to find it empty of people. They found a fire burning in the fireplace and dinner still sitting on the table. Not satisfied with just having a place to get out of the cold, the miners started poking around the house. They found a trap door under a rug in the kitchen and pried it open. The narrator said that a terrible smell that made the men retch wafted out of the cellar. But what they discovered was not, in fact, a cellar for storage. It was a system of carved tunnels lined with iron rings, cotton beddings, and chains bolted into dirt walls. Um, Dirt walls, Daniel. How difficult is it to pull a bolt from a dirt wall, do you think?
So from a dirt wall, unless it's really deep, and I mean I'm talking about like mobile home anchor deep, right? It,
Right?
it's it's really relatively easy. I'm not a circus strongman. I'm not a power lifter, but I've pulled up street signs with enough leverage and a little elbow grease.
Hmm.
And now the kind of men that they're talking about are hard men, men that have done hard physical labor all of their lives. And you're going to tell me that they don't know how to use their own body weight and leverage to pull the rings from the wall? Shenanigans. I call it shenanigans.
Yep, I agree. At least twice in the narrative, we've been informed that no men who entered the still house were ever seen again. However, we're now told that the next morning the miners went to the sheriff's office.
Right. This whole crew of men walked in, had a look around, and instead of pulling up floorboards, which was mentioned earlier in the video, to find the hidden crawl space, they just find a hidden cellar doorway underneath a carpet. And so they just traipse on down into the cellar pretty as you please and have a look around before they go and tell the sheriff about it.
Yep, but darn it, by the time the authorities arrived at the still house, the fire had consumed the building. The only thing that remained was a stone foundation with markings etched into it. The sheriff described the symbols as half religious, half anatomical, and buried beneath the foundation. They found the remains of three female skeletons arranged in a circle, hands clasped, faces turned inward as if in prayer. But there was something wrong. What? But there was something wrong? All the other stuff was fine?
Right. There's sigils and scientific gobbledygook all over the walls. And the the most yes, the skeletons would probably be the most disturbing thing going on. But all of this together, and so we don't hear anything about the corpses. You can assume that the corpses are supposed to be the uh, the skeletons are supposed to be the corpses of the sisters.
Yeah, that's what I assumed.
Except the there was smoke coming from the chimney and all this other stuff. So it completely flips the narrative on its head that they were presenting, and it's just a whole mess.
Right, yeah, because they go from full on human women to skeletons. There's a lot that happens in between. Even if they were consumed in the fire, you would not find just skeletons arranged in a perfect circle under the foundation. I've been trying to figure that one out too. It says that uh, it was under the foundation that these women were found. So the if the foundation was rock, did they bury themselves under the rock? Ugh, anyway, I'm not going to get too far into it because, like you say about
Right.
suspending disbelief, you could spend your entire sanity and just trying to get through this stuff. Anyway, we're told that each skeleton's spine had been surgically opened, and inside the spines were metal wiring and glass vials, which were somehow fused into the bone. Okay. So what do you think was the conclusion of this the sheriff's investigation after discovering this? Well, you know how the government has always censored official documents based on their religious evidence relevance. Me neither. But Deputy Marshal Edwin Long described the site as unfit for public record due to its unholy nature. His notes were sealed by county order and sent to Little Walk for federal review. But here's a twist. Wouldn't you know it, those notes never arrived in Little Rock. Gosh golly, nothing works around here. Years later, Long's son recalled a box of burned papers his father kept for some reason. Because when you want to destroy evidence, you got to make sure that you at least keep the evidence of the evidence, right? I'm puzzled by this. The son described what was written on the burned pages, but I have to call bullshit on this. We use wood heat for our home. And when I stick a piece of paper in our wood stove to use as kindling, what's left of that paper is impossible to read, let alone handle without it immediately turning to dust.
Right. The whole thing is absolutely craptastic. It's full of contradictions and shenaniganry, and it gives me a migraine trying to wrap my head around the bullshit.
Yeah, it's so full of it. Its eyes are brown. Oh, but the
Right.
sun but the sun described the skulls having silver caps fixed into the cranial cavity. That would mean inside the skulls, right? Inside the cranial cavity? I don't know. Suggesting a crude electrical conduction. According to the burned notes from Deputy Marshal Long, the sisters sought something through the bodies of men and used their own as vessels.
Right. And experimentation was a common theme in Victorian literature. I mean, look at Jekyll and Hyde. So
True.
that bit kind of fit, you know, to make it work in their narrative. But how are they doing this to themselves? And then still walking around the market and bringing fresh produce into town in the middle of winter.
Yeah, I was very puzzled by that. I was trying to think, okay, I can understand if they attached the electrodes to to the skull from the outside, but the cranial cavity is where the brain is. So I didn't. Okay, I don't know the logistics of that. I'm not a doctor, so maybe it's possible to cut your own
Neither are
spine
they.
open. Right? Yeah, yeah. Neither are they. We'll get to that too. Anyway, the local population collectively decided to never speak the McCullough name again. The property was condemned because it was declared cursed, and the land around it was overgrown. Now, you'd think this would be the end of the story, wouldn't you? However, this is where we begin leaping back and forth through time, and I'm predicting that we will hear a repetitive refrain of weird things seen and strange disappearances for the next 47 minutes and 24 seconds. I'm guessing this because I am taking notes as I listen to this story for the first time.
Right. I noticed when I started listening to it that the story was being contradicted and repeated throughout. And then it does, I mean, it contradicts itself at least three times that I can think of in the first 10 to 15 minutes.
Yep, yep, it sure does. Well, the narrator goes on to tell us about iron rings being found by hikers, hunters finding bones that didn't look to have come from animals, and every once in a while the ground would just give way and expose the outline of tunnels. Okay, stop. The outline of a tunnel? Not the tunnel, then. Conveniently, the ground would later close up again, hiding those tunnel outlines.
Of course they do, because then it's not a mystery, right? I mean,
Well,
Scooby Doo mysteries are more engaging and easier to follow than this video.
right? It was here that I decided to peek at the video notes within those of this disclaimer. This video is a historical folklore investigation created for educational and entertainment purposes. All events are based on documented history, period accounts, and regional folklore. Certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling realism. Right. No scenes depict or promote a real world violence or harm. Viewer discretion is advised due to the dark thematic content. I take issue with this disclaimer. What possible educational purpose could this sack of lies and exaggeration serve? And only certain elements have been dramatized? I'd say every element has been dramatized multiple times, as well as repeated and rephrased in order to force the video to reach the near 1 hour target time.
Right. And like I mentioned earlier, I went looking for information about this pack of lies and bullshit early on, and and because I wanted to find a better telling of the story that maybe had a more cohesive story, but there's nothing there. I looked and I looked, and I like to, I tell people my Google poo is strong, and I couldn't find anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I keep wondering when the breeding cellar would finally be explained. It's prominently featured in the video title, so I would have expected it to be front and center in the retelling of this so-called legend. Instead, the narrator embarks on some story padding, skipping all the way to 1979 when a family found a diary in a chest located in a barn of a property which the couple had purchased. Along with the diary was found a vial containing the blood of several different men. An unnamed investigator, the narrator tells us, examined the list of missing persons from between the years 1883 and 1899. This researcher concluded that all of the missing men shared two traits. First, each man had no relatives in the immediate region of their disappearance. And secondly, each man was between 25 and 40 years old. Hold on. The first point is only a little weird. The stranger the strangers in a rugged area and heavily forested region where they are unfamiliar with the area might be prone to disappear regularly is only minimally surprising. But the point that the men were all between 25 and 40 is not at all a similar shared trait. The only thing that such a fact might signify is that men between 25 and 40 are more prone to take risks that might end badly. And that's always been the case throughout history.
Right, but it's trying to make the narrative work, and it's such bullshit that it keeps tripping over its own feet in an attempt to walk us through the lies. So
Yep.
men that of that age tend to travel away from home seeking their fortune, and
Hmm.
so for them to disappear, it's not surprising that those are the men that are disappearing because they're out doing things and things of that nature. I mean, they're out working for logging companies or
Hunting.
for boundaries hunting, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it happens.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Finally, we get to the subject of breeding. Yay! The narrator reveals that two more chests were found in the 1980s at an auction. One of the chests contained the remains of a preserved infant specimen labeled Experiment 12. Now, wait just a goddamn minute. This is an estate auction? I do believe normally those are conducted by professional auctioneer agencies. Did no one bother to open the chest prior to the auction? Imagine the auctioneer. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item is a Victorian era cedar chest, and just wait until you discover what is included inside.
Right. I mean, there were stories of remains being auctioned off, but this was prior to the 70s. And by that point that there were rules in place to prevent, the auctioning off of remains and human body parts, you know?
Right. After that little nugget, we just set it aside in order to learn more about McCullen sisters. And yes, the surname has changed at this point. In a fashion that is typical for this genre of literature, a letter is somehow sent to another person who later disappeared. In this case, a man who had been hired to fix the property's well told his fiancee that he'd been asked to stay a few nights and helped keep the sisters warm. But it's not warmth they want, it's something else, unquote, he told his fiancée cryptically. Of course, she was understanding and believed him choosing to keep three single women warm was perfectly logical and normal.
Wait, I, you know what? I missed that. You're going to tell me that his wife was, or sorry, his fiance was okay with him sharing warmth with not only one single woman, but three single women on multiple nights? Bullshit.
No kidding. We now find out that the three sisters had an accomplice. Dr. Charles Wayland received regular payments from Abigail McCullen, and in his ledger is scribbled a note: specimens arrive healthy, cycle continues, progress promising. Unquote. He vanished in 1900 when the still house burned down. From Okay, this is the second time the still house is burned down. I just realized that just reading that now. That's interesting. Okay. From these details, we are supposed to conclude that he was working for the three sisters, and quote unquote, some believed that he was helping the sisters preserve genetic material.
Right. Because they're fully capable of surgery and everything else, but because they're women, they can't do it on their own.
Right? Yep, yep. Obviously, they need another penis haver to be in the situation. Okay, and at this point in the story, it I decided to change it. Oh, I'm sorry. Edit. At this point in the story, it decides to change to an entirely different story about three other sisters in Tennessee. But aside from the names and locations, the story is nearly exactly the same of what it was told so far. More bones, more carved sigils, more glass vials containing body parts, more vibrating noises inside the earth.
Okay. Because they couldn't make up enough about the first three sisters, they had to make up three new sisters. Oh wait,
Yeah,
they killed them off early on, so they had to, they had to extend the line somehow.
yeah, yeah. They decided to kill off the three main characters in the story, and then afterwards they go, "Oh, we just killed them. Now we don't have a story. Let's introduce three more." So anyway, I've listened to several videos of this genre, and all of them follow pretty much the same path and contain many of the same elements. Most particularly, how official records are frequently lost or purposely destroyed, but the narrator somehow is able to uncover very detailed statements from those missing and destroyed documents. Also, religion, bastardized science, and folklore always form like Voltron into an evil mix of silliness and absurdity. Lastly, the Earth is an eager partner in these demented shenanigans.
Okay. So the kind of stuff they're talking about, the experimentation, the mutation, whatever you want to call it, would be an affront to what Earth, Earth spirits it, and witches of the green would stand for. The Earth would never want to be complicit in those kinds of shenanigans. I mean, there's the black, but the black was a whole different thing, and it was usually corrupted Earth magic that had been corrupted by, the railroads and industrialization, and then
Yep, yep, yeah. It's I am inclined to think that they really do a disservice to paganism in stories of this kind, because I'm not into paganism myself. My husband was at one time, but still, I've looked into it enough to learn that it's mostly just, wishing for good things to happen. So all this kind of silliness is just, it's really kind of insulting. If I were pagan, I would be extremely insulted by this whole narrative. But anyway, in their defense, the stories are just engaging enough to be interesting and repetitive and boring enough to send you into a deep sleep.
you're right. You could definitely listen to these as you went to sleep without getting terribly engaged. Annoyed, on the other hand, is a whole different breed too.
Yep, potentially. Potentially. As I listen to the remaining video, the narrator tries to convince the listener that the ground isn't merely dirt and rock. It's a womb with a cardiovascular system attached. Atop all of that, the ground has needs. In order to placate the ground as modernity advances, 25 men must disappear every 30 years or so.
And that right there is some black magic bullshit. You know what I mean? Why in the hell would Mother Nature want to be complicit in any of that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, she's a psychotic mother now. Another feature of the videos is this genre that there's not a coherent timeline. The story bounces back and forth between several decades and even centuries without warning. Also, government cover ups abound because nothing ratchets up the believability factor like a good conspiracy.
Right. And I think I said this earlier. The chronology is awful. Excuse me. The timelines jump back and forth, and it's an absolute, pardon my language, shit show.
It certainly is. It is at the 45-minute mark that the story casually tosses in an element I had not heard up to now in any of these videos. The ground was not breathing, not a breathing, living thing, as the story has been asserting up to now. No, dummy, it's a reactor. Duh.
Wait, what?
Yeah, yeah. The story claims that the ground is actually some kind of nuclear reactor, and that's how all this stuff happens. So disregard everything that's been said up to now. So, and if you thought a reactor claim was odd, that was nothing compared to the statement that at 48 that quote sociologists studying the area found unusually low rates of soil erosion.
Okay, wait a minute. Sociologists were studying soil erosion. Aren't
Yes,
those geologists?
exactly. Yeah, but it said
And
sociologists.
right, and around which area? You know?
Right. Yeah, well, basically any area that has dirt on it, I'm assuming. So instead of breaking down the remainder of this video, I think it'd be a good idea for you and I to discuss the genre of AI generated content. Do you agree, Daniel?
Absolutely. Let's get past the nonsense and it's just a mess.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with folks taking advantage of AI in order to produce videos of this kind for entertainment purposes while making a buck or two doing it, especially given the current economy that we are experiencing at the moment.
And here's the thing: if you're using AI to expand on something that you've already created, uh, that you've already written a basic outline for, it's one thing. It's another thing entirely just to give it a prompt and let it run, and then not edit it.
Right. Yeah. Also, if the folks who make these videos were to stop, I'd have to do something that's actually productive and meaningful, and we both know that's not going to happen.
Nonsense. Because there have been people writing crap like this even before AI really became a thing.
True. Yeah, true. However, I just wish the posters of this type of content would fess up and make it abundantly clear that the so-called historicity of this type of video is dubious at best and downright full fabrications at worst.
Right. When you're writing things like this, make sure you make it clear that this is for entertainment purposes only and that there's not any real historical basis behind it. And get your bread. I don't have any kind of problem with that.
Yep, I don't have a problem either. If you remember as far back as the 1990s, you will remember when you'd actually get history from the History Channel. But then reality TV blossomed, and suddenly scripted, staged content was deemed real by fiat. Now, the History Channel is best known for Pawn Stars and Ancient Aliens, and the word history was bastardized until it had nearly no meaning at all.
Exactly. The History Channel has gotten so bad. There's so much crap on there now. You used to be able to watch it and it would be filled with actual documentary information. But in the current climate, nobody wants to believe the facts because if they did, things would be a lot different now, wouldn't they?
hmm I would prefer words like history, real, and true to carry actual foundations of objective facts to back them up. It's fine to conjecture about the meaning behind those facts and even expostulate possible outcomes that have no evidential backing. But to just pull names, locations, and dates out of nothing and claim that they are facts is irresponsible to me. What do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, because people will believe anything because it's on the internet, right?
Perfectly said, yes. But returning to the funny, I do hope that these creators will continue to produce this sort of content at least for the duration of my lifetime. Just looking at the number of videos about this one story, and I've found three separate videos for this one story on YouTube, three different YouTube accounts. So there's a bottomless well of content for ripping apart and laughing about.
Oh, and I hope I get to join you again, and I'll bring my chainsaw.
Oh, please do. Well, I think that wraps up our review of the Ozark Sisters breeding cellar. 25 men vanished in Appalachian Mountains, 1899. A title so long that I'm not sure I'll be able to get it uploaded onto YouTube. I want to thank you, Daniel, for joining me and helping me tear down this video. Do you have any final thoughts before we hit the stop record button?
Yeah, everybody, just do basic research. It's not hard. And I hope, Kenny, that you have a great day. And I hope that the listeners have a fantastic day and a wonderful week.
Yes, thank you. And you do the same. And dear listener, thank you for listening. And please stay tuned to this channel for more dissections and silliness. If you want to see more of this content, please subscribe. And if you like this video, why not demonstrate it by hitting that like button? Until next time, this is Canny Bellingham, hoping you have a wonderful day.
You're listening to You Can Get There From Here, where the roads are winding, the stories are crazy, and maps don't mean a thing. So grab your boots and saddle up, we are chasing tales untamed. From haunted mines to mountain pines, no two roads are the same. The compass spins, the banjo grins, we ride where legends claim. On the Can't Get There From Here podcast, where truth wears a crooked wing. Can't get